Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Authenticated Applications and Secure Sign-On through SAML, brought to you by dotCMS and Ethode. I'm Alexandra Barcelona, Director of Marketing at dotCMS, and I'll be today's moderator. I'd like to start by going through a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to everyone who registered. If you have any questions during the webinar, please submit them in the panel on the side of your screen and we will review them at the end of the webinar. I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Stefan Schinkel, Chief Sales Officer at dotCMS, and Alex Sterling, Full Stack Developer at Ethode. With that, I'll pass it over to you, Stefan, to get us started.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us this webinar. We're going to talk about authenticated business applications with dotCMS. Now, we live in the golden age of digital, right? It's the fourth industrial wave, and digital brings a number of opportunities for enterprises, right? So whether it's driving operational excellence by automating and offloading back office and front office processes, or creating new business models that allows them to deliver new products and services and generating new revenue streams. Basically, most enterprises are currently executing on a digital ambition, right? So the ambition is around optimizing the business, transforming the business, or both. Oddly enough, according to research of Gartner, there's still 17% of the CEOs that responded that has no digital ambition. And that's where we want to be a piece of the digital ecosystem, right? Really delivering the content foundation as a service that allows you to build and orchestrate and employ a digital experience platform to really deliver a connected, trusted, and continuous customer experience, right? So that means that we deliver a cloud-ready, decoupled, and open framework, aiming for the highest level of no-code in the industry. Now let's dig a little deeper in trusted and what that actually means. Right, so most enterprises, and it's still the case, spend most of their money with regards to customer experiences to the public-facing side, right? Really the acquisition of new customers, driving brand awareness, executing on campaigns, and really promoting the products and the services. Now, that's only the tip of the customer experience iceberg, right? Because after the acquisition, as you know, during a customer journey, there's multiple touch points with the organization that sold you a product, right? And it's there where there's a huge opportunity to really distinct yourself from your competition by really delivering true one-on-one, hyper-personalized customer experiences with secure interactions that are trusted while respecting on the same side new legislation around privacy, right? So it's really a great opportunity to extend that customer experience from the acquisition phase to the remainder of the customer journey and really nurture and nourish the customer relationship. Now, when we talk about authenticated business applications that allows you to have those secure touch points in customer life cycles, we're talking about the following applications, right? So first of all, an intranet. And again, there could be an intranet where your customer service reps log into to support or enhance the process. Could also be an extranet. We see that a lot as well. Or B2C, B2B portals, or a community portal. Now, if we look to the dotCMS customer base and what our customers in the different industries are doing with dotCMS, then you'll see immediately there's a lot more you can do with dotCMS than just building a public-facing website or a mobile app, right? So plenty of opportunities regardless the industry you're operating in. Now, when we're talking about secure or authenticated access, we talk in the context of dotCMS, we're really talking about two things, right? So first of all, it's access to the content authoring and publishing environment for the business teams that create that content and compose those experiences. And on the other hand, it's the content consumption part, right? So that could be direct, when you log into an extranet and you visit secure content, or this could be indirect when you log into, let's say, a single page app or any third-party application that's consuming content from the dotCMS repository over secure REST calls. Now, with dotCMS, we want to deliver flexibility in this regard as well, right? So we support out of the box LDAP, whether it's Active Directory, Oracle LDAP, or Open LDAP, but also OAuth 1 and 2, and most notably SAML. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to Alex with Ethode to dig a little deeper into what it means to use SAML with dotCMS. Alex, take it away.
All right, thank you, Stefan. So let's talk about the SAML plugin .cms. What is the SAML plugin? It's a static plugin, which means it's installed in the .cms root plugins directory. It negotiates SAML requests and responses, SAML being the security assertion markup language. So what really happens is you have .cms, which is considered the service provider, the service being .cms and the back end and stuff like that. And then you also have the identity provider, which is something like Okta, ADFS, Shibboleth. Google can do it. There's countless providers as long as they adhere to the SAML specification. And what happens is a user requests to log in at the service provider. The service provider forwards them off to the identity provider. They actually do the login at the identity provider. They provide their credentials. Or they might have already had a session alive in a single sign-on type scenario here. So if their session was already alive, or they successfully log in, the identity provider will then forward them back to .cms. .cms will also send a packet of information along, which is the response containing an assertion saying that this user, this is who the user is. Here are some of their details. Here's some of their roles, that kind of thing. .cms looks them up, says either that user exists or I'm allowed to create users, in which case it will create the user or just log them in. And if there's any other information that it needs to negotiate, like, oh, it looks like their first name has changed, or, oh, it looks like they have a brand new role, .cms will assign that role, and it logs them in, and then they have access to .cms like that. How is this installed? Installation is just like any other static plugin. You just need to decompress or perhaps git clone the plugin into the plugins directory in your .cms root. I'm just showing that here. In my case, I have a directory called .cms for SAML, which is for this demonstration. I go into the plugins directory. I run git clone to get the plugin, and now I have the plugin in there. Next, I would modify the .cms-saml-default.properties file if it's necessary for you. In my case, there's something significant I wanted to add. Here I am navigating into there, and then what I'm adding here is this policy allow create equals true. What this will do is it'll allow .cms to create users if they don't already exist in .cms when they're sent from the identity provider. So what you can do is on the identity provider side of things, you can add users ad hoc. Say you have a brand new user, you want to give them access to dotCMS, you would add the user to the IDP application, you would assign them some sort of dotCMS role or something like that. And then when they first try to log into dotCMS, they get forwarded off the identity provider. They log in successfully at the identity provider. They get bounced back to dotCMS. The user's created, the roles are assigned, and now they have access to dotCMS. Last thing you want to do is deploy the plugin, just like any other static plugin that you might be using, and it'll deploy all your plugins at the same time. Just run the deploy plugin script, which in my case, since I'm on Linux, it would be the deploy-plugins.sh shell script. And then just start up dotCMS the way you normally would. Once dotCMS is all started up, we need to add the tool into the toolbar in the back end. So what you do here is you go to System, you go to Roles and Tools, go to a role. I'm going to go to CMS Administrator because I only want administrators to have this in the first place. We're going to create the custom tool group with this button over here on the right, which will allow you to add it to any other role, but we'll only check it as active for this user. And then what we want to do is, I call it SAML in this case. I give it an icon of FA-lock, which gives it this nice padlock. I order it as 7th, which will put it just after DevTools and before System. So sort of down here and out of the way, because you won't necessarily always be modifying this stuff. In the Tools dropdown, I select SAML Configuration, and then I just hit Save, and now we've got the toolbar, or we've got the tool available just like any of the other tools in dotCMS. So now with the tool, you can begin adding your SAML configurations. So what you do is you would go to the SAML toolbar over here, you'd expand it, you click on the SAML configuration tool, you would click Add New SAML Configuration, you'd be presented with this dialog here. You can name the configuration, just give it something recognizable. I would give it the name of the identity provider. So this might be Shibboleth, this might be Google, this might be Okta, this could be any of the providers out there. Whether or not it's enabled, you can just turn this thing on or off if something's, if you want to go back to normal dotCMS login for some reason, if you're shuffling configurations off on your IDP, something like that, identity provider. Here we see SP issuer URL. This is service provider issuer URL. This is just, I would just set this to the homepage of your site. The service provider endpoint hostname, just put the host here. You don't need any HTTPS or // or anything, just the host name. Next thing is a private key and a public cert. The private key is used to decrypt any encrypted assertions, which is an option for some identity providers. It won't necessarily be used by all, but upload your private key, and then the public cert that you created based on this, which is just an x.509 cert, there might be a specific specification used by your identity provider, and sometimes your identity provider will provide that certificate. Either way, just upload that cert into this location. There's an identity provider metadata file. You can upload this here. You might not have this yet. You might do this configuration first, then go to your identity provider, set it up there, and then your identity provider will provide you with an XML file that is the identity provider metadata file. And then you can take that back in here and upload it here. Next we have the validation type. So with the public cert, the response and assertion can be signed by the identity provider, and this is just increasing levels of security here. In this dropdown, you can choose to have the response and assertion to be signed, to enforce that, to enforce just the response to be signed, or to enforce just the assertion to be signed. In which case, just make sure it matches up with the settings in your identity provider. Further down here in the dialog, we have an area for override properties. So here you could do something like ensuring or enforcing that the assertion is always encrypted. You can do small tweaks to the SAML protocol here. There's lots of settings you can do. You can set filters on incoming roles so that roles that aren't, say, prefixed with CMS are ignored or something like that. Lots of options here, which are detailed in the README for this plugin. And then lastly, we have a sites dropdown, and here's how you actually enforce this SAML configuration against different sites. So this makes this multi-tenant. This makes it so that you're able to have one SAML configuration, one identity provider set up for multiple .cms sites. Just click Save here, and then that will add your new configuration. So with .cms now configured, I would ensure that your identity provider is configured properly. So we're going to take a look at an example here. This is Okta, which is a highly configurable identity provider. Gives you lots of options here. The most important ones, though, we'll just go over a single sign-on URL. So this is going to be the HTTPS URL to your site. You're going to want to add /.saml/login/ the identifier for your specific SAML configuration. So if we go back just a couple steps here, when you're adding your SAML configuration, when you come back in here to edit this configuration ID field will be filled out. Just copy that. Oops, I'm clicking on a screen here. Just copy that and paste it at the end of this URL here. And that's the URL that the identity provider will send you back to in order to log you into .cms. So you'll want to hold on to that URL. You might as well copy it right now. You'll want to just add your homepage in here as the audience URI. The rest of this stuff down here doesn't matter too much. You'll want to make sure the response being signed and assertion being signed matches the settings that we had here in this validation type here. So in this case, response and assertion are signed. And in this case, response and assertion are signed. Leave the algorithms as default if you're using Okta. The single sign out or the single logout URL will be exactly like the login URL, except we'll change the word login to logout. The service provider issuer will be the same as the audience URI that we had up there. Now, the certificate that we uploaded into .cms we'll want to upload here as well. So make sure you upload the same certificate that you used in .cms and the SAML configuration there. The rest of the stuff down here you can leave as default. And then here's some of the most interesting stuff, and this is common to all the identity providers, is that in order to identify the user and to send along required information about them, you need to map some information from what is in the identity provider to what is in .cms. So on the left here, we have fields that are in .cms that are associated with the user in .cms. So we have given name, we have SN, surname, we have mail for their email address, and we have authorizations down here being their roles. And we're going to map the user's first name in this identity provider in Okta to the given name, user's last name to surname, user's email to mail. And then down here, in Okta, you can set up groups, multiple groups. A user can belong to an arbitrary number of groups. And what will happen is, in this case, if the group starts with CMS, you can set different filters here in Okta. It'll actually send that group name along. And so I have a couple of groups in this Okta configuration called CMS Administrator, CMS User. You could have CMS Power User, CMS Anonymous, all that sort of stuff. And pass it along as authorizations. All of them will get included that match this filter. And then .cms will assign those roles to that user once they log in. And if they change, .cms will change those roles every time they log in, every time that the identity provider notifies via login that they've changed. So next thing is just ensure the configuration is active. You can do that from the edit screen up here. Make sure it says enabled. And now you can log into .cms backend and get forward to the IDP for login. So let's do that. Let's start the demonstration. Live demonstration actually looking at how .cms behaves with the SAML plugin. Okay, so I've been logged into the back end here, making these changes, making these configuration updates. We have everything that we saw at the end of the demo there, except now we have what we have here is sites .cms.saml.ethode.com and .cms.alternate.ethode.com, both assigned to the Okta configuration. So let's see what it's like when we log into one of those. So let's fire up a brand new session here in Incognito tab. Let's do cms.saml.ethode.com. We go to the home page here. Let's go to /.admin. And we get sent off to Okta. So here I will log in with one of my accounts here. Sign in. You see we get bounced back to .cms. We get logged in, and now we're in here. If we take a look at our user here, you can see we showed up with a CMS administrator role. That's kind of neat. This user did not exist before I logged in. It's been assigned a role. I have access to the site. Now I have another user called Joe Tester. Notice that Joe Tester doesn't exist here. Let's log in as that user real quick. SAML .admin. And let's log in as Joe Tester. We get logged into .cms. We see we have limited amount of tools over here. I must be logged in with a different role than CMS administrator. Let's hop into our admin account here, and let's see what was added here. So now we see we have a Joe Tester down here, and they showed up with CMS user. That's because in the IDP, Joe Tester is in the CMS user group. Okay, so now let's log into the second site that we have set up here. So let's pop over into this. Let's close it. Let's start up a brand new session here again. .cms.alternate.ethode.com/.admin. So this is a whole separate site in .cms. We go here, we see we're forwarded off to Okta. I'm going to select my administrator account. Why not? Let's sign in as that. And we can see we get sent back to .cms.alternate.ethode.com. And here we are, we're logged into the other site. It's that easy to have a single SAML configuration working for multiple sites here. We can see that these are actually multiple sites. Oh, up here, because we have SAML alternate and then this third one, which we're not using for this demo. But all that we need to do is add both of those down here at the bottom. All right, next up, let's show multiple configurations against multiple sites. So in here we have Okta set up. We have it only set up for the .cms.saml.ethode.com site. And then for Google, we also have it set up, but for .cms.alternate.ethode.com. So these are now separated, one for each site. So let's log in real quick to the one that we have before, but make sure it goes to Okta. Here we are at Okta. We'll just complete the login real quick. See that we're sent back to .cms, logged in correctly. Let's log out. Let's change this to alternate.ethode.com, and let's go to .admin. You can see we're sent to Google here. I'm going to log in as this Alex at Ethode. And then we're sent back to .cms.alternate, so the other site. So that shows how you can just bifurcate, or more so, change up your identity providers, one for each site if you need be, one identity provider for like 5 sites, and then a separate one for yet another site. It's fully configurable. Can have as many identity providers hooked up as you need. So we've talked about the basics of the SAML plugin, the basics operation of it, sending you off to the identity provider and back. Let's look at one of the more advanced things, which is assigning roles. So let's take a look at this Joe Tester user right here. Currently they have a role of CMS user and SAML user. They always get this one. Let's see how that we can change this. So currently Joe Tester, he exists in Okta. So he is a CMS user. He's in the CMS users group here in Okta. Let's remove him from that. Let's see, minus save. All right, let's get back to groups and let's add him to the administrator group. Manage people. Add him in here. Save. Okay, and then let's have him log in. Cool. Log in as Joe Tester. And now we see he has all the abilities a dotCMS administrator would have, including the ability to look at his own roles. And look, he's got the CMS administrator role here. Let's go quickly see, let's go back to Okta here. Let's see how we would add him to yet another role. So let's just start up a whole new group here. Let's call it CMS owner. I'm pretty sure that's one in .cms. And CMS power user capitalized. Okay, let's add him to both of these groups. There you go, Joe. One more group here, owner. Okay, so he's in both of those groups now. Let's close this session and let's fire up a new one. Let's log in as him again. Okta. Log in as Joe Tester. I am still an administrator at least, which is good. That makes sense. But now I also have the power user and owner roles. Real quick, let's see why that happens. We did show it earlier when I went over how this stuff works, but in Okta, in the configuration for the SAML settings, and then it takes a while to click into here, but here at the bottom of the page where we have attribute statements, we are sucking in stuff like their email, last name, first name off the user object, but here we're getting authorizations off of the group. So here we can take group names and map them directly to, in multiple group names, and map them directly to a user's authorizations. And authorizations are what dotCMS is expecting them to be called, but it will turn those into role keys or roles in dotCMS. And we're actually using a filter here. It says starts with, equals, contains, or regex. So we can make it so that it'll only do things prefixed with CMS. Now we know in dotCMS, so that's useful. Say you have your identity provider is something like ADFS, or it's hooked up to LDAP, and then it's proxying through something like ADFS. But in LDAP, say you have a bunch of groups. You have, printer groups. You have things that don't have anything to do with dotCMS. If you prefixed all of your roles with CMS, then you could filter them in this fashion. Same thing here with Okta. Say you had a bunch of groups that didn't have anything to do with dotCMS, like this arbitrary group. Let's add Joe Tester to that. This won't get dotCMS won't even see it. It won't have a chance to confuse dotCMS or anything like that. It won't have a chance to cross wires with any roles accidentally, just because there is perhaps some arbitrary role in dotCMS. So since we're only accepting the ones that start with CMS, we'll be good. plug in one more time just to make sure. This will reinforce the roles. And let's check out roles. They should still just be the default SAML user and the 3 CMS prefixed roles. Yep, CMS administrator, CMS power user, CMS owner. So that's how easy it is to shuffle people around in groups. We saw we moved Joe Tester from being just a CMS user and not having full sysadmin capabilities to making him a complete CMS administrator, giving him all the abilities. You can do the same thing to downgrade people. We could remove Joe from the administrator role here, and he would lose those abilities. Let's do that real quick. Say we've maybe we've not fired Joe, but we've reassigned him. He's definitely not the owner anymore. He's just a CMS user. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Okay, he's still a power user. Let's get him out of here too. Let's make him a CMS user again. Save that. Get him back into this role here. Okay. Oops, that was me. Let's put Joe back in there. All right, great. Okay, now get Joe all logged out here. Joe logs in after being reassigned. He gets into dotCMS, and he only has these abilities now. He's not a CMS administrator. He goes, phew, I don't have to manage all those roles anymore. Now we can focus on keeping the site up to date and managing content, that kind of thing. So that's how easy it is to modify roles, reassign users, juggle all that sort of stuff outside of dotCMS, inside your identity provider. Okay, that wraps up the dotCMS SAML plugin demonstration. Back to you, Stefan.
All right, thanks, Alex. Yeah, let's wrap up some of the questions that you might have. There have been a couple. The first one, can we still log in with a local admin account when the SAML integration is not working? We've seen in the past with LDAP that if LDAP is down, nobody can log in, even system administrators. Alex, how does that work?
Yep, so there is a way to bypass that. So whichever way you log in, whether it's /c or /.admin, you can just append native equals true URL parameter, and then it will default to the default .cms login. The only thing being that you'll need to have a user set up in .cms with a password associated with them in .cms. So when the SAML plugin creates users, it's not necessarily going to create a human readable password, but if you manually associate a password with that account, then you will be able to log in with that. And because of this, I suggest that you create a special like rescue administrator user, which most systems tend to have anyway. And if you've used the LDAP plugin, you probably have something like this as well. But in this case, you don't have to go through the whole shuffle of uninstalling the LDAP plugin, firing .cms back up, then logging in. In this case, all you do is you add the URL parameter, you log in with that user password combination that is saved in .cms as opposed to the identity provider, and then you'll be allowed in. So it's pretty simple.
Yeah, no, it certainly looks simple to me. Another one about groups and roles. Can LDAP groups be combined with local groups roles in .cms, or will the user only be get the roles based on what the IDP provides in the SAML assertion?
So there is a way so if you don't send an authorizations mapping back from your identity provider, .cms won't do anything with roles. It won't erase ones that you've set or anything like that. So you can manage roles only in dotCMS as well. Just don't include an authorizations attribute along in the SAML response, which is configurable in the identity provider.
Okay. And what identity providers does the SAML plugin support?
So it should support any SAML 2.0 and up protocol identity providers are out there, which is pretty much everybody. They will need to at least sign the assertion, the response, or both, any of those options. If you have one that doesn't do any signing, that's not going to work with this because those are the only 3 options that we have available. But looking through identity providers while developing this plugin as well as testing this plugin, I couldn't find anybody that didn't allow all of those options actually. The only confusing one for me being Google, who they just implicitly sign the assertion, I think. Yeah, the assertion, and then you can choose to sign the response. There'll be some stuff like that where there'll be some implicit things you'll have to find out by Googling like I did when people hit brick walls like that, and then you'll just find, oh, it's just a default for that identity provider. But other groups, I'm trying to think of other identity providers. There's a massive list. If you want to look for identity providers, I'd say a good resource is actually to go to Amazon because they integrate with every identity provider in the whole world. And primarily they do so using SAML on top of their IAM stuff. And I noticed that basically in order to work with Amazon, you need to support what we support, and everybody wants to work with Amazon, so everybody will support the options that we need, it seems like. But I was only able to test a limited number of them. Seems like it works with them right off the bat, though. I didn't run into a single identity provider that I was configuring that I couldn't make work with the plugin.
Great, cool. And what versions of dotCMS is the existing plugin compatible with?
So right now it's not compatible with 4.1.x or earlier. It's only versions greater than that up until version 5. We're working on getting version 5.x and forward compatible, but that's going to be, we're targeting just Q1 of next year, 2019.
Okay.
So I would stick to version 4.3.2 or version 4.3.3. Those are definitely working.
Okay. Then there's one more question, I think. Is there an extra license fee for the SAML plugin? I can definitely answer that. So the SAML plugin is only available for clients with an enterprise edition at the moment, and it will require a license per environment. So you cannot purchase it separately. There has to be an existing enterprise license in place. For existing customers, I'd encourage them to talk to our customer success team for more details, right? So the SAML plugin is only available for the enterprise edition. I guess that's it for today. Yeah, thanks a lot, Alex. It was a great overview and demo of SAML and dotCMS. And yeah, looking forward to see more of this in the near future. All right, thanks everyone for joining. Have a great day, and yeah, hope to see you soon in another webinar. Have a great day.